Hi everyone, this is Robin Joy, the Happy Food Chef, and I'm here today to talk about pu'er slash poulet. And I can't remember which one is which. One is Mandarin, one's Cantonese. What is pu'er tea? We're going to refer to it as pu'er because if you buy it, you'll probably order it under pu'er, and that is P-U apostrophe E-R. At any rate, pu'er is the tea that you generally associate when you go to a Chinese restaurant and they serve the Chinese tea. That is a type of pu'er. And usually that's the low end of the pu'ers. So in your tea realm, you start with your white tea, your green tea, then you go to your oolongs, your black teas, and then at the end, you go to your pu'ers. And your pu'ers are in the range of, they can be from the least expensive pu'er, which is usually what you drink at a Chinese restaurant, or it's the equivalent to the highest level of your fine red wines or any wines, the top level. So you can buy a cake, and they come either in blocks or cakes, or sometimes little teeny round cakes that are like this big with a little hole in there, and they're mounded. They can be anywhere from fresh all the way to, I have actually in Singapore tasted 100-year-old pu'er tea. Pu'er tea generally tastes, it's very earthy. It sometimes tastes like dirt, depending on the quality of the tea. And generally, the other thing about teas and teapots, someone asked me recently, well, can I use my French press for making really good teas? And I said, I would not recommend that. If you only are going to have one pot for all your teas, then yes, you can have glass, because the glass won't absorb, and glazed ceramic ware, it won't absorb any of the flavor of the tea. So in the morning you could make your green tea, and in the evening you could make your pu'er and not have to worry about it. But if you make them in a traditional clay pot, in China, I was actually there in a place called Yixing, and they actually get the clay from the mountains there. And it's a special clay, and they make all their Yixing, very famous teapots. And generally, you season your teapot. And if I have a teapot that I'm going to make, let's say an oolong tea, just in that one teapot, I'm not going to make green tea in that. I'm not going to make pu'er in that. I'm not going to make white tea in that. That teapot is only for that particular tea. And over time, what happens is the teapot absorbs the flavor, and so that adds to the richness of the tea. You won't get that in glass or a glazed ceramic. So that's why they use, for these teas, mostly ceramic, they use clay pots. Your pu'er uses a higher temperature water. So you always in all your teas bring it to a boil. There's a chemical reaction that happens when you boil the water. And then for each tea, there's a temperature that you bring it down to. So your white teas, your green teas are a lower temperature. Your oolongs and your pu'ers and black teas are at a little higher temperature. So your pu'er is just, and one of the things about pu'er is that it's a digestive tea. That's why you drink it in Chinese restaurants. I know a lot of people would say, oh my God, I ate so much food, but you know what, an hour later, I'm not even full. Well, you're drinking all this tea, and what the pu'er also tends to do is, usually Chinese tea has it's very high fat, a lot of animal fat in it, and it actually helps move that fat through the body to eliminate it. So it helps in the digestion of the food, and that's one of the reasons that you don't feel bloated an hour later after you've eaten this huge meal. But to really appreciate when you have an aged pu'er, and a lot of times when I lived in China, I would buy new pu'er And I had, because I lived in Japan, so they wrap the teas a lot of times because you also have to be careful in storing it not to get moldy. And in the summers, it's very humid there. So you have to, they store it a lot, not in plastic. You store it in actually newspaper or paper. It's wrapped in paper and it's stored like that. In Japan, they have these boxes that are called chibako. And chibako are wood boxes that are lined with metal. And in the old days, because if you've ever been into a Japanese home, they're very sparse. So you may have very, very small amount of furniture. And a lot of things are stored in boxes in these chibako. And they're lined with tin to keep the bugs out, to keep the moisture out, and to preserve things. So tea is one of them. They would actually store tea in the chibakos. So when I moved from Hong Kong, I brought with me tea that I started to age when I moved to China, to Hong Kong, and I brought it with me. I brought big cakes and blocks, and I brought it to Japan, and I stored it in my chibako. So it's just a fun thing, and to then taste it, because what I would do is I would taste the tea when it's new, and every year I'd break off a little tea from the block and taste it to see how it's aging. And then, of course, I brought my teas back to the States, and at this point, I used them all. But that's the beauty of a lot of your Pu'ers. So that's it for now on Pu'er tea.